bringing the people behind our food to life.
Part of being a gardener is the curiosity of discovery. You grow something you never grow, whether it's a flower or a vegetable or a vine, and frequently, if you're paying attention, you're delighted. It's something you didn't know about. You learn something. This garden, we've been gardening here, let's see, probably since about 1990, 20 years. So. Before that, I lived in Southern Oregon, and that's where I started gardening, and started learning how to farm, because I had no idea about any of it. 1973, I was living in a commune in the Applegate, 25 people, different buildings, and I was running out of money. I didn't want to work. So I picked up there was a shovel, and I went out to a place which was, it was a 40-acre farm. There was a lot of room, nobody used a lot of it. And I started turning over the ground with a shovel. And after I turned over the ground, I planted onions, sets. I went to the local Grange and they were selling sets. I put potatoes we had were sprouting, I put in potatoes and onions. That was my beginning. I started to get into it. I started, okay, guy up the road has a tractor. There's a field over there, it's 2 acres. He'll till it for $10. He tilled the field. I took a shovel, and for 2 days I bedded it out with a shovel. The whole field by myself. Nobody was interested. I was flipped out. I was so high on taking a shovel and turning it into a garden. I knew I'd found something that makes sense to me. And then when we moved to Corvallis, because of the co-op in part, and because I wanted to learn the world flora, I needed the Oregon State University Library so I could use the Botanical journal so I could read about the stuff to learn about plants. I knew I didn't know enough about any of it, and I wanted to become, so that's when I could hand you a layout of APG2. I learned the world flora among different levels of resolution, and when I haven't gotten to the gardens here, but I was on my way to telling you about the answer to your question about what about this garden. We grow the common food plants that we like to eat. Our choices over the years, when we had 200 batches of tomato, now we're at the ones that we grow and develop that we like, and the heirlooms that we find the best. So the Amish tomato, which is a paste salsa and canning and slicing tomato, is one of our favorites. We have a very good line of the Amish tomato. We have Palestinian tomatoes, but the Palestinian tomato didn't come from Palestine, it came from Palestine, Ohio, in the Seed Savers Exchange in 1983. Makes huge, giant tomatoes. My daughter likes that one a lot. Tomatoes, corn, beans, onions. When I had lymphatic cancer for one sequence, we became strictly macrobiotic, and so we didn't eat any solanums, no potatoes, no tomatoes. And so what do we eat? Onions, learned how to grow onions. And from a pack of onion seeds, you get more food than any other pack of seeds you buy from a seed company. So I learned that. And I like onions, and we grow 10 kinds of onions every year. And we've been breeding some onions we like. And we collected a bunch of heirlooms also. And we took F1s and turned them into open-pollinated lines. So we've done many things. I don't reject F1s. The job is only half done. Very common, and when you go to a gardening store, they say you get an F1 tomato. It means you had one mom parent, one father parent, male and female, and you bred them 1-to-1, and you got an F1 hybrid. It's the first generation from the cross. Well, if you take them and save the seeds, you get the parents back, and you also get, in the F2, the next generation, you get the F1 and the parents, so you get a mixture. You got to pick them out to make an F3, and you go a couple more to stabilize it, and you get your own line. So I learned how to do that because nobody taught me about it. I never went to school in anything having to do with plant breeding or diploids. It was just taking some other stuff and putting it together and saying, oh, you can do this, that this can be done very simply. If Burbank figured it out, and Mendel began it in 1860s, and people have been doing it, and we probably can do it in 2010, that anybody can. I didn't know how to pollinate a pea. I started wanting to do pea breeding, so I read Mendel's paper that was translated in 1905 into English about how, and he shows a picture. Here's what you do. You open up the pea flower, and you can take the pollen is here and the stigma is here, and you can cross them. And so all of a sudden, I read it in a book, right? And I went out and did it. part of the counterculture's mythos was about flying saucers and alien intelligences that land on the planet and talk to you about all sorts of stuff. So, and that life was planted here by somebody on a spaceship came here and planted life on the world. So I said, okay, I'm a scientist, what can I do with this? Well, let me look at all the most remarkable plants I know on the world and see if they don't have any relatives on the earth. Because if you bring it from somewhere else, it's not going to be connected up to this whole thing of connections that the biosphere is. So I thought, okay, apples. I showed you that book by Maberly, The Story of the Apple. So Kazakhstan and what's called the Tanshen fruit garden is a place on the world of, what they say, 400 miles by 300 miles area of mountain ranges where the apples come from and the walnuts grow there. And anyway, I thought, wow, let me do it for everything. So I took citrus and I traced it and I read the Taxonomy of Citrus by Swingle and learned about all the cultivars. Obviously, citrus came from these relatives. They were cross-hybridized. They ended up, they were little fruits like this. They ended up with big fruits. Same thing, on and on and on and on. I couldn't find anything on the world that didn't come from here. I spent maybe 10 years just examining that supposition that it came from somewhere else. It doesn't say it doesn't come from, but microbially it could have come from somewhere else. But nobody stepped out of a spaceship and planted an apple tree or an orange tree. That nothing of that kind came from anything except wild relatives that had been in previous times in smaller populations or larger. So these things got me interested in the nature of diversity. And as I did it, I learned more about every which way I could about diversity, and everything I could get seeds for I would get, and I would grow it if we could. You know, I think that the nutritional standpoint is best attained by mixtures. So if you make a tomato sauce, you throw in onions and garlic and oregano and maybe a little thyme, and you put in some peppers, and you put in, so it's making, I felt this without scientific basis, but an intuitive feeling that the more diverse you eat, the more kinds of stuff your body may need in the life you get. So rather than narrowing and having favorites, I don't like favorites. Any parent knows that you don't want to have favorite children. You love them all, right? And each has a different fate and reality, gifts and abilities. So what if I find that I am delighted to find new stuff to eat, and there's old stuff I love to eat. One of the examples, when I was 7, and my parents would drive up from New York City to a couple hours north into upper New York, in New York State, we would go to a farmer to buy strawberries and sweet corn. And I remember he had maybe a couple acres of corn. And I could run out in the corn and nobody could see me. And I realized that was the first time I felt safe in my life, was in Mr. Wester's corn patch. I was 7 years old. Well, the corn he grew was Golden Jubilee. So when I became a farmer and interested, I went and looked for the original Golden Jubilee strain, and we call it True Gold now, because the Golden Jubilee was an F1, and I turned it in an OP, and it's called True Gold. I love to eat that corn. So as an example, there's something as a kid that really changed my life, and now I can still grow that corn. It has a lot of meaning for me, as well as tastes delicious. It was one of the great breeding triumphs of American agriculture. There's nothing, as I said, like baking a good winter squash, Maxima, like a buttercup. And there are Japanese varieties I like. Hokkaido, very nice cultivars. Sweetmeat, Pacific Northwest heirloom, all Maximas. They're favorites. We grow them every year pretty much. We grow beans. We like this bean called Donna Truss from Eugene sent me an envelope with some big beans like this, white beans, runner beans. He says, this is an heirloom from Austria that's been in our family for several generations. Would you want to grow it? We grow it. It's called we call it Jack's bean, Jack and the Beanstalk. And it gets 20 feet tall some of the time, and it makes these big white beans. When you cook those beans in a bean soup, they don't fall apart, but they are delicious to eat, especially delicious. And we like Scarlet Emperor, another runner bean with beautiful lavender and darker colored seeds. We mix them and make bean soup with that. So I would say that lettuces, we've grown 10 or 20, 30 kinds of lettuce. We have favorites in various times, but if you walk out in the garden, we grow so much seed, the lettuce seed goes all over the place. They all come up as volunteers and we leave them alone. We weed out a few weeds and we have cover crops of lettuce. What do we like? I like the Andean crops. I like oca, mashua, yacon. We're adding varieties as we learn more about it. So if you get interested in oca like we have, and I got 1 or 2 or 3 originally, and 4 and 5, and now we have 10 or 12. Everything takes growing, experimenting, and survival testing about whether it likes your soil, whether critters eat it, whether it gets diseases that interfere with it being any good. All those are multi-level realities that unless you grow it out, it's not an intellectual trip. You got to grow it, you got to grow it well, you got to check it out and see how productive it is, whether you like to eat it. We grow lots of beans, we put them in the seed collection, we don't eat them, we don't like them. We are always doing trials. We're always at the level of original discovery about what we like. So there is, to me, no static answer about which are a favorite or what do you like. What I liked 20 years ago, I may or may not like now. I'm a different person too. Life is extraordinary. I think that's what I'm talking about all along more than anything else. Is that without enough deep involvement in life, in some aspects, in some group of plants, in some group of organisms, something that really captivates you, you don't get a chance to express yourself. And what happens within a young person, you have lots of energy and great chi. The earth is a place you can work and work and work, and it's very rewarding. It yields, it feeds you, it enlightens you, and yet I know that most people have a down view about the amount of physical work, so you'd rather have machines and pay other people to do it. But that's not the point. The point is that life itself is extraordinary, and if one gets more involved in it, one gets less distracted by a whole bunch of, and one sees the context of destruction, whether it's aluminum, iron-rich pollution flooding the Danube River in Hungary, or it's the earthquake in Haiti where the buildings fall down because they were built poorly because you took away their public resource of a cement and a flour and rice factory and you shipped it up. Because the way we are manipulating to make money and to gain advantages on one another is a travesty on the common fact that we all live on the same world, and that biodiversity of life is the true miracle that we are all usually searching for. So that's what led me to this whole thing.